Are we Nazis now? Just exactly what the hell is this? Go to your browser, okay? Do this. Do this for me, will you? Type in Nazis.us. That's NAZIS.US. Now hit enter. I'll wait. And while I'm waiting, let me welcome you to Politics by Jake. This is the Weekend Show, Part 2, June 28th, 2026. Welcome to 2026. Welcome to the fight. We have an existential election that is going to be occurring in November. It will decide how the United States continues as a nation. It may decide whether the United States will continue at all. But now I've given you an opportunity to type that in. And I ask you, where did it take you? I'll tell you where it takes you, because I already did it, and I already know. It takes you to the website of the United States Department of Homeland Security. Yeah, I know. No, I didn't believe it either. So I tried it. And then I tried it again. And then I tried it on multiple browsers. Same result. Now, what are we supposed to make of that? That's why I asked, are we all Nazis now? Because somebody bought that domain. Somebody registered it. Somebody configured the redirect. And somebody has kept it working. Now, are we so stupid as to think that this is something that totally slipped the mind of, the computer wonks and the techs in the administration? Well, I don't know. I mean, maybe they are that dumb. I don't think so, though. You come to your own conclusions. I'm not telling you what to think. But I am asking you a question. Why? Why would anyone do that? And perhaps even more importantly, why hasn't anybody done anything about it? Because if you ask me, one reasonable inference is this. Well, I'll give you several. Whoever did this no longer feels the need to hide. They believe, and this is the second interest, they're far enough along in what it is that they're planning and what they're doing that they can come out into the open like this. The third inference, they believe they can no longer be stopped. And the fourth inference, perhaps more importantly, they believe they have enough of America with them that there won't be any meaningful objection. In fact, probably no one will even notice. And if this is the case, we all need to be extremely concerned. Now, let me pick up where I left off. I'm going to propose to you what this means, the co-opting or the deliberately changing of the URL. URL stands for Universal Resource Locator, for the website of the United States Department of Homeland Security's to Nazis.us. Almost literally, Nazis are us. Means exactly what I said. Whoever did this no longer feels the need to hide. No longer believes that they're out in front enough of this that they can come out into the open. They believe they can't be stopped, and they believe that enough of America is with them so there won't be any meaningful objection. Now, that's 3 or 4 inferences there. It's my inference. You're free to draw your own, but I'll tell you this, that could be enough right there. I could end the story with that right here. And that would be enough, far and away enough, to put you on notice and to fulfill my duty to you, my listeners, and my viewers. But I will go further, and I will say this. I don't think this is a story about a domain name. Not really. I think it's about confidence. I think it's about political confidence, institutional confidence, the confidence that comes from believing that the tide of history is moving in your direction. And that brings me to something that I've been watching now for quite some time. There are people in the alternative media, people with very large audiences, even larger than mine, who are arriving at many of the same conclusions that I either have been reaching or have reached, or I've been talking on my program for years. And this is great because that means that they're watching Politics by Jake. And recently, one of them suggested that Donald Trump may ultimately try to negotiate his own exit from the White House while the getting is good. And when I heard that, I thought, exactly. Because that's the mentality I've been describing on the man for 10 years. I've said repeatedly, Donald Trump is fundamentally unsuited for public office. Not simply because I disagree with his policies, but because everything ultimately comes back on and to one person, Donald Trump. And when he's cornered, like he is now, when the walls begin to close in, like they are now, when everything around him is collapsing, like it is now, he's not going to think about the country. He's going to think about himself. And he's doing that now. He's thinking about himself. That's who he is. That's who he has always been. And that's why I've described him before as exhibiting the characteristics of a malignant narcissist. One of the characteristics of malignant narcissism is not merely selfishness. It's not merely grandiosity. It is a willingness, even a kind of satisfaction in destruction itself. I've used the word gleeful before. I've used the word joyous before. This is a person who enjoys inflicting cruelty. They get pleasure out of it. They rejoice in it. Who enjoys watching institution breaks. He is a destroyer. He's like Tom Buchanan in The Great Gatsby. Remember? I talked about him just yesterday on yesterday's show. He breaks things. He destroys people. He experiences no consequences for anything that he does. And then, after he's done these things, he just retreats back into his money. His money, his privilege, his entitlement. And as the narrator of The Great Gatsby, Nick Carraway, says at the end of the novel, he says that Tom and Daisy were careless people, right? That's exactly who they were. Read the novel. I recommend it to you. F. Scott Fitzgerald, one of the great writers of American history, one of the greatest writers of the 20th century. What did he say? They broke things. They broke people. They killed. And then when it was all over, they just receded back into their money, back into their privilege, retreated back into their entitlement, leaving other people to deal with the wreckage because they knew they would never have to pay for it. That's Tom Buchanan. And that's Donald Trump. And that is his palace courtiers who want to be like him and who love him. Because it's not just about Donald Trump. But let's get back to Donald Trump. That's why I say he is a destroyer who sees destruction not as a tragedy, but as an opportunity. And if that's true, then we have to stop thinking about this as merely another political disagreement. We have to start asking a much larger question. What happens to a constitutional republic when people who don't value constitutional government acquire the power to reshape it? Because that's where I think we are. And I'll tell you something. I think he's planning something for November. He is. And we can speculate on what it is, and I have, and I can, and I do, and I will. But, I don't know for sure. You know what they say about opinions. They're like elbows. Everybody's got two of them. But he's planning something because he knows what's going on. And let me qualify that by saying I have never, you know me, Jake, I have never attributed human intelligence to him. But what I have done is I have attributed to him a kind of an animal cunning. And I differentiate that. And that cunning allows him to be informed and to know what's going on. And he's got his ice goons out there right now, even as I am speaking. And he's arresting people off the street. Like he said to Pam Bondi, he said, "You've got to go after my enemies because we're running out of time." This is it, folks. This is what he's doing. He's arresting people off the street at this moment, and that includes U.S. citizens. And those people that he's arresting, they are becoming the American version of what the South Americans back in the 80s called the desaparecidos, the disappeared, those who disappeared. And they're going into camps that he's created. And it's appropriate to call those camps concentration camps. And when or whether those modern day desaparecidos ever come out, that's anybody's guess. Anybody's guess. So be warned. Nazis are us. Nazis.us. Again, I say, Nazis are us. It's just like that happy, sappy, crappy toy store, right? Except this time, it's real. It's a thing. And this is Politics by Jake. Welcome to the show. We'll break the station, have a commercial, and we'll be right back. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Let's be blunt, shall we? America is litigious. It's unstable, and it's financially weaponized. If your name is on everything you own, you're a sitting duck. At Twain Consulting, we help you vanish legally, ethically, and permanently. From land trusts to layered LLCs, we teach you how to restructure your assets so the predators can't see them and can't touch them. This isn't a loophole. It's a strategy that the wealthy have used for decades. Isn't it time you got the same protection? Call Twain Consulting at 805-380-5699 or visit us online. Protect what's yours before someone else claims it. And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. Okay, now let's talk about another claim, okay? Donald Trump says that he won the 2024 election in a landslide. Well, did he? Well, let's see. And in order to do this, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but we're not going to use CNN. We're not going to use NBC. No quotes for them. We're not even going to use Fox. We're not going to use Newsmax. And we're not going to use One American News Network. All of these billionaire-owned, shill, phony baloney, corporate, corrupt, controlled, complicit media sources. You know what I mean? Okay. Let's use the government's own numbers, because yesterday I told you something. I talked about Truth Social. I talked about how there are people there who sincerely believe that Donald Trump was sent by God. I showed you a clip. I talked about this on the show before. This isn't the first time. You can go to youtube.com /@politics by Jake. You can go to Rumble. Jake is on the air. It's Politics by Jake. It's all there. I've talked to you about this before. I've even shown you a clip of an interview of what appeared to be an entirely ordinary, well-intentioned, civilized human being who sincerely believed, after the interviewer had spent time drawing him out so you could see how ordinary he is, how otherwise normal he was, how calm he was, who sincerely believed that Donald Trump was a prophet or had been sent by God, it was the hand of God. Go look at the clip. I talk about it there. And I told you that those people, among other things that they do, tend to spend more time on Truth Social than on any other social media platform. And of course, this is Donald Trump's established platform. If you don't believe me, go over there. Read it. Read the comments. Read the posts. See what kinds of people are there, okay? See what kinds of things they say. Because this is what they believe. And when Donald Trump comes on, as he does, over and over and over again, because, these kinds of things are his stock in trade. Like, I won the election in a landslide. This is Donald Trump. He's going to repeat these things over and over and over again. What did I tell you? I just told you on yesterday's show, those of you who are paying attention. If you're not paying attention, don't worry, I'll tell you again. What did I tell you? The 2024 election was not a landslide in the popular vote. The certified results were approximately Donald Trump, 49.8%, Kamala Harris, 48.3%, and the margin, 1.5 percentage points, roughly 2.3 million votes. So if Donald Trump, or if someone says that Donald Trump won the popular vote overwhelmingly in a landslide, that's just simply not true in the ordinary sense. What happened is that several things got conflated. The popular vote, and the perception was created afterwards that Trump by the popular vote by 1.5%. Historically, that's a squeaker. That's a squeaker. That doesn't even, now, you get Maggie Haberman, who's got to watch her P's and Q's A New York Times reporter knows that just like an attorney does, they have to be careful what they say in front of a judge because they know that this is not the only case that they're going to go in front of that judge on, and they're going to see that judge again. So they better be circumspect. They'd better use a little decorum. They'd be a little careful about what they say. And that's Maggie Haberman, New York Times. Part of her job is to be able to have access to Donald Trump and to interview him. And if she talks about things in a way that he doesn't like, well, I mean, and this is the state of our media. This is what we've come to. That's what we've devolved to, which is why I say it's crucial that you pay attention to voices like mine and others that are out there of my colleagues. And I know you are. I know that there are people who are getting tens and hundreds of thousands of views. I'm aware of that. So good on you. And I say keep doing that because 1.5%, Maggie Haberman will say, oh, is overwhelming. And she does. I've heard her say it on MSNBC, no less. But 1.5%, that doesn't even qualify as modest. 1.5%, that's what we call a squeaker. He just squeaked on by. For comparison, Nixon in 1972, 23%. It's the popular vote I'm talking about. Reagan in 1984, about 18%. Johnson in 1964, about 22%. Eisenhower, Republican, in 1956, about 15%. Those are landslides, okay? Those are landslides. Trump's 2024 popular vote margin isn't even remotely in that category. Now, did he win the electoral college? Yeah, absolutely, he did. I would say that was comfortable. You would call that a comfortable win. 312 electoral votes to Harris's 226. That is a solid electoral college victory, but it's not the same as an overwhelming landslide. Sorry, it's not. Those are two completely different things. And that's where the psychology comes in. And that's where the grift comes in and the con. And you'll excuse the expression, the salesmanship. I don't want to be too pejorative about salesmen. When Trump says this on Truth Social, when he says it to Kristen Welker and he repeats it over and over and over again, it gets inside the minds of the people who support him. And it creates a perception of decisiveness. And it creates a perception of truth. Oh, well, why would Trump lie? Oh, and by the way, did you know he was the hand of God? Oh, yeah, we know he was the hand of God. But even a comfortable electoral college outcome is not the same thing as an overwhelming popular vote victory. We have a nation now that's roughly divided 50-50, roughly. And a nation like that is not a nation speaking with one voice. It's a nation still closely divided. And as I said yesterday, a pretty good rule of thumb for a landslide is going to be 60% or better. Maybe 58, 59. I'm not going to argue over a point or two, But 1.5%? 1.5%? That's not a landslide, okay? That's a victory. It's a squeaker, not a landslide. And this is why you've always heard me say that the phrase mandate gets thrown around just way too much, too casually used in American elections. A 1.5-point margin is a victory. It's not the sort of margin that historically caused people to say, The country has decisively settled this question. Harump, harump. I didn't get a harump out of that guy. Give the governor, give Jake a harump, harump. Little blazing saddles there. Now, I just gave you the numbers. But remember what I told you about Truth Social. If Trump says it's a landslide, they don't look at the numbers. Because as George Carlin once correctly said, once your lifestyle becomes your identity, you're screwed. Actually, he didn't say screwed. He used another word. You're screwed. Because from that point on, you feel compelled. You must defend that identity against all comers. And if you're a Trump-loving person, if you're a maggot, if you're a Christian evangelist, if you're a Christian Zionist, or, any of these people whose identity has become wrapped up in this movement, you can't listen to anything that contradicts that identity. Although I will say some of these people do watch Politics by Jake. Good on you guys. Welcome to the show. So either you're going to ignore the statistics that I just cited, or you're going to say they're fake. Oh, Jake's fake news. Jake's fake news again. You're going to say they're the product of the corrupt media. Jake is corrupt. And I know, some of you are already preparing in your mind. I can see the little gears and wheels turning that you're going to write in the comments. And you're thinking, there goes that Jake again. That darn Jake. This time I'm going to call him out. And I know some of them will say, you say the very same thing about the media. And you're right. I do. In fact, I go Trump one better. I call them the 4 C's. I don't say the corrupt media. I call them the corporate, corrupt. Everybody repeat after me. We can have an audience participation. The corporate, corrupt, controlled, complicit media. That's what I call them. But here's the problem, all right? This is not fake news. Jake is not giving you fake news. The election results, they don't come from the corporate, corrupt, controlled, complicit media. At least not originally, they don't. I mean, they come from 3 different government sources. They come literally from the government. First, the states. Every state certifies, states control elections, right? That's absolute, that's written in the Constitution. State controls its own elections. States certify its own election results according to state law. Usually through the Secretary of State. Sometimes the name is different. Sometimes through a canvassing board. Sometimes through a governor. And those are the official vote totals. And you've heard me talk before about how Trump in 2020 tried to pressure secretaries of state in places like Georgia and Arizona. And the famous call to the Secretary of State there where he said, I need, basically, I'm paraphrasing, but he said, all I need out of you is 12,000 votes, which I don't have right now. You said it. Okay, moving on. Did the same thing in Arizona, did the same thing elsewhere. Second, the National Archives. The governors transmit the certificates of ascertainment. They're called certificates of ascertainment. The National Archives publishes the certified national vote, popular vote. The certificates of ascertainment publishes all these things. The certificates of vote, the historical records. Third, Congress. The electors cast their votes. Congress counts those votes in joint session. That's what January 6th is. January 6th is Acclamation Day, which unfortunately now forever afterwards, because of Donald Trump, will be known as Insurrection Day. That's the final constitutional certification. That's the ballgame. Now, me, if I was looking for the gold standard, I'd use the National Archives. Those records are built directly from the certified state documents, official electoral vote totals, certificates of ascertainment, certificates of vote, and they've got historical election data going all the way back to 1789. So anyone who tells you, as Trump does, by the way, all the time, that the media is fake, that he won in a landslide, remember this, will you? The government that he arguably now controls hasn't changed the numbers. And those are the numbers I'm reporting. Number one, they're the correct figures. Number two, they come from the government. That's where I got them. And number three, that's not a landslide. That's a victory, but they're two different things. And if words don't matter, why keep calling it a landslide? I'll tell you why. Because words shape perception, and perception shapes power, especially when they're repeated often enough and long enough that people stop asking if they're even true. And this is Politics by Jake. We'll take another commercial break and we'll be back. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Imagine, if you will, having the power to disappear from the prying eyes of creditors, identity thieves, nosy strangers, all while protecting what you've worked so hard to build. That's what virtual invisibility offers. It's not magic. It's smart legal and business strategy to shield your assets and privacy so you can live free, confident, and in control. Most people think that asset protection is only for the ultra-wealthy, but it's for anyone who wants peace of mind and financial security, including you. Don't wait until it's too late. Take control now. Call me at 213-465-0639 or go to facebook.com/Twain Consulting to learn how virtual invisibility can protect you and your family, because when you're invisible to risk, you're unstoppable. Now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. All right, and this is Politics by Jake, and we are back. On Politics by Jake, I talk about political and economic realities that impact you, and I do this so that you can act accordingly in your own personal lives. If this kind of analysis is something that you would like for your personal or business financial life, contact me. I do one-on-one strategy sessions. We can set something up like that and we can talk personally. Link is in the description. So that said, let's move on. And let's do a little geopolitical. You've heard me talk about Iran, most assuredly. And you've heard me talk about the fact that for 50 years, and I'm not for these guys. Donald Trump and I pretty much feel the same way. And I know that other presidents, I'm not alone. There's a lot of people in government who are not, they're not for the Iranians. And they have for almost 50 years. They have stuck a thumb in the eye of the United States. They call the United States the Great Satan. And they have used proxies in the region and kind of taken them over. They've infiltrated into the governments of these various countries. And one of them is in Lebanon, and it's Hezbollah. And there are others. There's the Houthis of Yemen, and there's Hamas of the Palestinians, and there's also Kata'ib Hezbollah. And there's the Iraqi militias that are in there also. So, but I want to talk about Hezbollah because Hezbollah, you have a situation where Trump's really mad with Netanyahu, or has been mad, because he won't stop attacking, striking Lebanon. And when you're talking about Lebanon, you're talking about a captured government. Hezbollah has captured the government of Lebanon. And I want to talk about that because Trump apparently got mad. He was yelling at Netanyahu and saying things like, oh, you'd be in jail if it wasn't for me. And you might say that's a little bit of projection, but let's talk about that. It's well documented that Hezbollah has long received substantial financial, military, and political support from Iran. It has aligned itself with Tehran's regional strategy. When you move from that to the broader claims about what the Persian people as a whole believe, it's worth framing those as observations about visible trends, such as recurring protest, public dissatisfaction, rather than implying unanimous views. This keeps the historical foundation of your argument strong. It still allows you to make the larger point. And I want to begin with the proposition that many people in the West still fail to understand. Hezbollah has never, ever really been about Lebanon. It's always been about Iran, always. Now, that sounds like an extraordinary statement because for years, Hezbollah has successfully portrayed itself as a Lebanese resistant movement, a patriotic organization defending its homeland against Israeli occupation. And there was enough, at one time, there was enough truth in that story to make it, at least believable. By the year 2000, Hezbollah had accomplished something that no Arab army had ever achieved. It had forced Israel to withdraw from southern Lebanon. Across much of the Arab world, Hezbollah became a hero. Hassan Nasrallah was celebrated from Morocco to Iraq. Many Arabs, whether Sunni or Shia, admired him. But here's the question. If the occupation was over, why didn't Hezbollah lay down its arms? And the answer, I believe, is because removing Israel from southern Lebanon was never its ultimate objective. It was only the first objective. You have to remember about the Iranians and their, sorry to say it, but the regime that has control, has captured Iran, are religious fanatics, the Ayatollahs, the mullahs. So this was only the first objective. Hezbollah continued fighting across the border over disputed territory, but at the same time, it quietly began pursuing another project, one its founders had never openly admitted. It began transforming itself from a resistant movement into the dominant political and military power inside Lebanon itself. And that is a very different mission. And 2006, Hezbollah crossed the Israeli border, killed 8 Israeli soldiers, and captured 2 more. And they were expecting another prisoner exchange. They'd done this before. Instead, Israel responded with a 34-day war. Thousands of Hezbollah rockets struck northern Israel. Israeli aircraft devastated southern Beirut. More than 1,000 Lebanese died, most of them civilians. Roughly 1 million Lebanese fled their homes. Hezbollah declared a divine victory because they're religious fanatics. because it had survived. But afterwards, Hassan Nasrallah made a remarkable admission. I don't know how I feel about this, but this is what he said. He said, had he known that the raid would provoke such a war, he never would have ordered it. And this tells us something important. Even Hezbollah's own leadership miscalculated the consequences of its actions. But the more revealing events came afterwards. In 2008, Hezbollah turned its weapons inward. For years, it had insisted that its guns would never be used against fellow Lebanese. Then, in a single weapon, it seized western Beirut. The resistance movement became the ruler. It ruled like one. By then, Hezbollah had built its own banks, its own hospitals, its own schools, its own television network. It had become a state within a state. And for hundreds of thousands of poor Lebanese Shia, Hezbollah provided services the Lebanese government never did. That part of the story is real. That happened, but so is the other part. The same organization maintained a private army that ultimately answered not to Beirut, but to Tehran. Iran funded Hezbollah with hundreds of millions of dollars every year. And that funding did not create an independent Lebanon. It created an Iranian proxy inside Lebanon. Then perhaps came the clearest demonstration of Hezbollah's true allegiance. In 2013, Hezbollah entered the Syrian civil war, not to defend Lebanon, not to resist Israel, but to rescue Bashar al-Assad, which is Iran's closest ally. The army supposedly created to fight Israel now fought on behalf of a regime killing its own people. That was the moment many across the Arab world stopped seeing Hezbollah as a resistance movement and began seeing it as something else, an Iranian expeditionary force. By 2023, Hezbollah had become the most heavily armed non-state military organization on earth. Israel estimates placed its arsenal at well over 130,000 rockets. Have you ever noticed how come they keep firing rockets? How come you can't destroy the rockets? How come there's always so many of them? 130,000 rockets. It had become the keystone of Iran's regional proxy strategy, stretching from Iraq to Syria to Lebanon and Yemen. And in other words, Hezbollah had become what I believe it had always been becoming. Not merely a Lebanese movement, not merely a resistance movement, but a principal military proxy of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Its loyalty was not ultimately to the Lebanese nation. Its loyalty was to the strategic objectives of Tehran. And that distinction, that explains almost everything that followed. When Hezbollah entered the war on October 8, 2023, it did not do so because Lebanon's interests demanded it. It did so because Iran's regional strategy demanded it. That's why I say Hezbollah has never been really about Lebanon. Lebanon was the battlefield, Iran was the strategist, and Hezbollah was the instrument. And this is Politics by Jake. We'll take a break and we will be back. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Let's be blunt, shall we? America is litigious. It's unstable, and it's financially weaponized. If your name is on everything you own, you're a sitting duck. At Twain Consulting, we help you vanish legally, ethically, and permanently. From land trusts to layered LLCs, we teach you how to restructure your assets so the predators can't see them and can't touch them. This isn't a loophole. It's a strategy that the wealthy have used for decades. Isn't it time you got the same protection? Call Twain Consulting at 805-380-5699 or visit us online. Protect what's yours before someone else claims it. And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. All right, this is Politics by Jake, and we are back. And on Politics by Jake, I talk about political and economic realities and how this can impact you. And if you like this kind of analysis, I do one-on-one strategy briefings, and we can schedule a session and talk about things. Link is in the description on this. So, all right, now let's talk about something that I talked about a little bit last week, which is the U.S. intelligence community. And they are absolutely crucial. We have this large intelligence establishment. A lot of it is under the Pentagon. A significant part of it is the Central Intelligence Agency. The director of Central Intelligence, still head of the CIA, who has the responsibility that goes beyond just the CIA, but Central Intelligence in general. Then you've got the NSA, National Security Agency, but you've got also things like the Mapping Agency. You've got the DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, explicitly in the Pentagon, and so forth. And I talked about this last week, and that's why something has happened on this I want to share with you. Now we have a deliberate wrecking job being done by a wrecker. A Kakistocratic wrecker hired by Donald Trump to do his bidding. Donald Trump loves to destroy things. He rejoices in destruction. He has to help out Xi, the Emperor Xi. He has to help out Vladimir Vladimirovich, Putin. He has to help out little Kim the Rocket Man. And he has to help out the mullahs and the ayatollahs, the religious fanatics of Iran. And this is this character, Pulte, Pulte. It's a real estate company. It builds homes, houses. Bill Pulte. He should have stuck with that. He's the heir to that fortune. He's not the builder of the company. He didn't build it. He's sort of the heir of the company. So this character is actually devoid of character. Remember what the famous words of the famous Mr. Wolf, just because you are a character doesn't mean you have character. This guy's devoid of character. He's devoid of honor. He's devoid of principles. And his debut as a government official was head of the Federal Housing Finance Agency, FHFA, where he rifled through the paperwork and came up with these things like people filling out the forms wrong. And when they asked you, is this going to be your primary residence? Some of them said yes, and it really wasn't. So, grounds for criminal prosecution, right? In other words, hyper-technical prosecutions, the equivalent of frame-ups of political adversaries, so on and so forth. Tish James was one of these, Attorney General of the state of New York. One lady from the Federal Reserve, her name escapes me right now. A few others. I'm sure he forwarded a number, whatever he could find. All right. So Trump, when Tulsi Gabbard, and we'll get to her in just a minute, Tulsi Gabbard left her post. The ostensible reason was that her husband has cancer. I think this is probably true. I don't really have any reason to disbelieve this, and we certainly wish her and him well. Did you know she was a member of the Hare Krishna movement? Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. When Tulsi Gabbard left her post, left the job, Trump immediately nominated Pulte. And there was an uprising, even amongst Republicans. And the Democrats, for sure, against him, but a lot of Republicans also against him because the guy has zero intelligence experience. And it's the statute that created the Office of Director of National Intelligence, the ODNI. So the job is DNI, Director of National Intelligence, the head of the Office of National Intelligence, right? Office of the Director, ODNI of National Intelligence. So there was a great desire not to let him take over this agency, to never get inside of it. That's what Senator Warren said. We've got to make sure, this is what he said, we've got to make sure he never gets in there. And the goal was, therefore, to put up a big, hue and cry. And they forced Trump to nominate a different candidate, the current head of the Southern District of New York. And the United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York in Manhattan nominated him. And he was about to have a very quick confirmation hearing and confirmation vote, maybe the same day. And then Trump said, no, I won't allow it. Trump is in the practice of sabotaging his own administration. This poor little rich boy pouting in order to get his own ways, his utopian program. He can't even get the reflecting pool right, full of algae. But he wants to get certain things, right? He wants to obtain other things. So Trump said, no, no, we can't have that done now. We've got to wait. Or he wants the SAVE Act. He wants his, voter suppression. And frankly, vote fraud from above. He wants that implemented. That's part of his plan for the November election, 2026. So it meant that Pulte had come in already last week and began looking around. And of course, the danger is, what can you do if you're only going to be there for a week or two? Well, I think I said it last time. Mass firings is what you can do. And that's the danger with Pulte. And that's what he has begun to do. Now, you ought to take a look and just see for a minute if we have any further news, because a lot of this stuff is Pulte. And here, Jason Crow, congressman, says he's worried that Americans are at risk because Pulte is now the acting director of national intelligence. And I'm reading here. The Atlantic says Trump has a Bill Pulte problem. That's good. Let's see. One day ago, CBS News reports that Pulte, DNI in his office, the ODNI, has fired 6 staff, took 45 of his staff that had been seconded, right? Seconded to him. They had been temporarily transferred to ODNI, and he sends them back to their home agency. So basically, he's trying to clear out the office. And people knew that he would do this because they knew what Trump wanted. So the office is not that big. It's not like the CIA, where it's in the thousands, in the tens of thousands. This is something smaller. And remember, this was the action of the 9/11 families in the years after 9/11, was that since they had been told that the problem with 9/11 was that the intelligence community was a series of silos, and that the silos had to be integrated, right? That they never talked to each other was the common phrase, that they hoarded their own information, that they didn't share it. And the ODNI, Office of the Director of National Intelligence, that was supposed to be the answer to that. And this was always a two-edged sword, because if you just have one intelligence agency, that's actually a danger. Because then, what if you're a dissident? You can be silenced. you can be intimidated inside that agency so that your alternative view never reaches the light of day. So it's probably better to have a number of different centers that are at least autonomous, that they can come up with their own take. I mean, in other words, if the CIA says one thing, well, maybe that's correct. Maybe it's not. Maybe the DIA or the NSA or the mapping agency or something like that, they'll tell you something different so that you get the benefit of diverse points of view. So this is an area where diversity is really a very important thing, as often it happens in the real world. So we're told that eyebrows have been raised in the Senate over Pulte's wrecking job as he begins it. And the White House says that there's strong support in the Senate for William J. Pulte to serve as the active acting director of national intelligence. Well, I'm sorry. I said it last week. I'm saying it now. He's there to wreck the place. And this is very serious. And I think this is very immediate because the point is it's not a peaceful and tranquil world out there. We have the cranks. Uh, I talked to you about this before. China, Russia, Iran, North Korea. It spells crinks. These are bitterly hostile enemy states. And all of them are experts in espionage. And not just that, but also in things like sabotage, terrorism, assassination, and things of that sort. And the price of independence, if you want it, we got independence 250 years ago. We want to keep it today. You need vigilance 24/7, 365, 360-degree intelligence. You've got to have that. And you can't have some kakistocratic rank amateur come in there with an ulterior motive and directive from a malignant narcissist who loves to destroy things. I mean, this is so serious. This is so important. We know he loves to destroy things. Come in just saying, boy, I'm going to please the boss. The boss is going to be happy with the way I make heads roll, because you look at this guy and you have to say, this is not promising. And so, honestly, what I think we're looking at is the blinding of U.S. intelligence, and it's a very serious thing. And with that, we're out of time. And this is the end of the weekend show. And hopefully, we will see you next weekend when we will have more. And this is Politics by Jake.